Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this ridiculously thin and light laptop is the 2019 Acer Swift 7. It's got a 14-inch display with very slim bezels around the side, and it weighs just under 2 pounds, measures about 0.4 inches thick. It's ridiculously thin and light, and it's the sort of thing that you might be able to take with you places you wouldn't normally expect to take a 14-inch laptop. So in terms of portability, I've been really impressed with this. In terms of design, it's a really nice machine. It's a premium machine that Acer is positioning as a computer for mobile professionals, road warriors, who really want sort of a compact device that they can use on the go. So there are a couple of compromises that come with this particular design, which make it a little bit hard to justify the $1,700 asking price. But at a lower price, I think those compromises might be something that you could live with. So first of all, it's got a relatively low power processor. It's got an Intel Core i7-8500Y chip that maxes out at around 7 watts. It's not something you would necessarily want to use for a lot of video editing or gaming, but it should be fine for basic day-to-day tasks, and I had no problem using this for my day job, which is updating liliputing.com, writing blog posts, and so forth. Another compromise is that we do not get a lot of ports. We've got a headset jack on one side with 2 status LEDs and 2 Thunderbolt 3 USB Type-C ports on the other side, and that's it. It charges via USB Type-C, and you can plug in adapters. It comes with this dongle, so if you wanted to have a USB Type-A port, another USB-C, and HDMI, you get that. You could buy separately an Ethernet adapter if you needed to, or you could just plug in some other adapter if you want to. So often when I'm using this on the go, I plug in a wired or a wireless mouse with a dongle and a USB-C adapter. It's not the most elegant solution, but it gets the job done. So not a lot of ports, but they are both Thunderbolt 3 ports, so they're pretty powerful. It does have 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of PCIe NVMe solid-state storage, at least on the retail version. The demo unit I'm testing has just 8 gigs of RAM, but performance is overall pretty good. But the third compromise, which I think is pretty problematic, is battery life. If you're talking about a mobile computer that you're going to take places you wouldn't take a normal PC, one thing that you might really value is long battery life. And Acer says this should be able to get up to 13 hours of battery life while web browsing. In my tests, it's more like 6 hours of casual web browsing. I got a little over 7 hours of runtime when doing a Netflix video streaming test, and when writing articles for liliputing.com, it maxed out at around 4 hours, which is really pretty disappointing for a machine that costs $1,700. It does have a fanless design. It is thin and light. It is very portable. But at around 4 hours of actual usage time, what would happen is I would start writing articles and I would think, oh no, the battery's down to, say, 20 or 30%. I don't know if I have time to write one more article. I should probably plug it in or take it home and leave this coffee shop or do whatever I'm doing. So in terms of mobility, that's kind of disappointing. Now you can, because it charges via USB-C, you can use something like this, which is a USB-C 45-watt power brick or a power bank. But this weighs about a pound. So you've got a 2-pound laptop, a 1-pound power bank. You might as well just get a 3-pound laptop that's going to last a little bit longer. And in terms of the power brick that comes with it, it's relatively small, but it's not quite as small as something like a cell phone charger. Now, I have used other power supplies with it that are a little bit more compact, and they seem to work as long as they crank out enough juice. This does, I think, 45 watts, but I've used a 30-watt power supply, and that works as well. One more compromise that I want to tell you about is the webcam placement, which is below the screen instead of above it. That's a design similar to what we've seen from Huawei and Dell on slim bezel designs. It's a little bit awkward, and we'll get to that in a second. But first, let's take a look at some of the nicer things about this computer. So let's go ahead and log in. You notice that the power button and the fingerprint sensor are both in the same spot. So I can actually put the computer to sleep and press it once to resume. You might have to press and hold if the computer's powered off or in a deeper sleep mode, and then just sort of hold your finger over it to log in. So that's pretty nice, and it's pretty responsive. The keyboard is backlit. It's not my favorite keyboard. Some of the layout is a little bit weird. We've got 5 rows instead of 6 rows. We've got the function keys are basically right up here, overlaid on the number keys. The page up, page down, home, end, and volume, and brightness, and arrow keys here are all sort of half height. The biggest issue I have, I think, is the placement of the delete and backspace keys. Delete is kind of awkwardly located over there, and I find myself sometimes hitting delete when I mean to hit backspace or vice versa. Caps lock is also sort of half width, which is a little bit weird, but I don't actually use that button that often. Sometimes I've hit it by accident, but otherwise it's fine. Generally speaking, I can type OK using this, and let's even... Well, I was going to do a typing test, but let's not take the time to do that. Let's just go ahead and open it on LibreOffice Writer. I'll show you what typing looks like on here. And also just sort of what app load times look like, I guess. So this is me typing on the Acer Swift 7. The keyboard isn't my favorite, but it's fine. And you can get used to the quirks pretty easily. So overall, it does what you need a keyboard to do. And maybe you can read that, I don't know. Let's go ahead and close this, and we've got that web browser open. I'll show you another thing that's a little bit interesting here, which is kind of hard to come across on video, but the speakers are surprisingly quiet. So let me unmute it. So right now the volume is at 20%. I'm going to crank it all the way up. 7-inch touchscreen display, and it's an update to a model that came out in 2018 called the One Mix Yoga, which is pretty quiet. Again, this isn't the best way to demonstrate this, but I'll just say this is probably one of the quietest laptops I've ever used. Now, the good news, I guess, is that the audio doesn't overmodulate. It's not clipping. It doesn't sound too loud, and sort of make it sound, I don't know, like it's distorted in any way, but it's just not a very high quality audio experience, and you're probably going to want to plug in speakers or connect headphones or something if you really want to use this as a multimedia machine. And you might, because it's got a really pretty nice display. I hadn't really thought to load up any images that look nice here, but I don't know, let's get a pretty looking game running maybe. Now my battery is down to 26%, so I wouldn't be surprised if it drops significantly when I try to load this game, but here we go, connecting to Steam. It's a touchscreen display, I should probably point out, and it is a 1080p display, and it has pretty good viewing angles. It's a glossy screen, as you can see, but overall, it works pretty well. A little bit of bounce when you press it there. And another thing I should point out is that we've got a magnesium alloy, magnesium aluminum, magnesium lithium. I forget the exact details. You can find them at littleputing.com. But the materials used here to keep it lightweight and sturdy are a little bit different. So it doesn't feel quite as solid as some laptops. The screen is covered with Gorilla Glass, though, which is nice for a little bit of protection. It's a very thin layer.
It used to be a military base. Well, it used to be a ranching thing.
I'm just going to mute that while I keep talking. But you notice there's a little bit of give here, and I didn't point that out, I guess, when I was typing. But if I push down towards the center, we get a little bit of give. Sort of flex there. And you can even see some flex in the screen, which is a little surprising. And it's not something that you're likely to, intentionally do very often, but it is something that sort of talks a little bit about the build quality here. So again, I mostly just loaded this game up so that we could see a little bit of the screen, what it looks like when displaying something a little bit prettier than the desktop wallpaper. You can use this for gaming, for casual games. In terms of overall general performance, I found that it's okay. Like I said, I didn't have any problem doing my basic work for Lilliputiting, which generally involves opening a whole bunch of articles in a web browser, maybe 10, 20 browser tabs at the same time, using IrfanView to do a little bit of image editing, sort of cropping, resizing, maybe adjusting some colors. And while battery life was only at around 4 hours while doing that, it didn't struggle at all to do that. Now, when I ran some synthetic benchmarks, I found that computers with less powerful processors, so this is the GPD P2 Max, which is a small computer weighs about 1.4 pounds, is a lot thicker, but smaller, has a 8.4-inch screen. This GPD-P2 Max has a Core M3 8100 processor and outperformed the Core i7 8500Y in many benchmarks, and I think the reason for that is that this supports active cooling. There's a fan in here and no fan in here. This one is clocked to run at around 8 watts instead of 7 watts and can hit 15 watts for short periods of time to give it a performance boost. That's something that the Swift 7 cannot do. So because of the CPU, because of the battery life, and because of this awkward camera location, which I should point out before I finish this video, it's a little hard to recommend based on the sort of expensive $1,700 price tag. For half the price, I think I'd be willing to put up with pretty much all the compromises that I've mentioned here, but at full price it's pretty difficult. So I fired open, I opened the camera application here, and this is what it looks like when you actually pop up the cameras. You'll see there's a little status LED here, and you'll also see that as I put my hand here, this is what happens. So if I bring this a little bit closer so it's more comfortable for typing, you get a kind of unflattering angle where you get a nice look up my nostrils. Fortunately, they look fairly clean today. But no matter where it's positioned, even if it's a little bit farther back, and changing the angle of the screen doesn't change the angle because it's all down here, but no matter where it's positioned, if I decide that I'm going to type when I'm on a video call, you're going to get a pretty good look at the hair on my knuckles. It's a 720p camera. It looks pretty good, but the location is really not my favorite. It is nice that you sort of have this built-in privacy shutter, though, which is, it's basically just looking forward. So that's all you're going to see if somebody were to try to hijack your camera. There's a couple of microphones in here as well. It supports far-field voice detection, and it does support booting from Linux, from a USB flash drive if you want to run Linux. There's some more details about that at littleputing.com. But yeah, overall, it's remarkably thin, remarkably light, has a really slim bezels, a nice display, a nice design, a bigger screen than you would expect from a 2-pound laptop, particularly one that is so thin. But the mediocre battery life and performance make it kind of hard to justify the price. The mediocre performance, I think, would be fine if you got 2 to 3 times as much battery life as you do, or the mediocre battery life might be easier to justify with better performance, but it's just all the trade-offs together make it a little bit difficult to recommend this particular laptop at this particular price. It might be something worth keeping an eye out for to see if there are any hardware revisions or price drops in the future that might make it a little bit more attractive. But for now, I'm really glad that I got a chance to test it because it is such a remarkable computer in terms of design, but I find that $1,700 is just too high an asking price, I think, to justify it. When closed, I haven't really tested this, does it? Yeah, you can see the lid flexes a little bit too. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart. I'm not really that concerned about the flex, and I don't really feel it that much when I'm typing, but it is something that I think some people who are more sensitive to might notice. And so now if you look closely at my hands as I'm typing in the middle of nothing, I should open a text box so it doesn't look silly when I'm typing. Typing when I press the keys, the center of the keyboard moves a tiny bit. It's comfortable, but it might bother some folks who are sensitive to flex. And if you push intentionally hard, push hard intentionally, that's more grammatically correct, you'll see it move more. Anyways, so that's an overview. If you have questions, hit up littleputing.com. I'm a little bit more responsive there than I am on YouTube. And check out the full review. You can find a link in the description to this video. This is Brad Linder with Littleputing, and a look at the Acer Swift 7. A thin, light, and kind of underperforming laptop given the price.